internet! Today I'm here to do my August wrap-up. So August was a crazy month for me. Reading-wise, I started the month off with BOOKTUBE-a-thon because it was in the middle of BOOKTUBE-a-thon when the month started. And also I participated in a month-long readathon called the Newts Readathon, which was based off of the Newts exams in Harry Potter. Didn't do so well with that, but I'll get more into that later. I also left a job and started a brand new job. And so that was crazy. It's been a weird month. So yes, I read a lot of books. I didn't read the books on my TBR, really. Just because a lot of the books I read at the beginning of the month were either for BOOKTUBE-a-thon, or it was me trying to finish books that I was in the middle of when BOOKTUBE-a-thon started and I had to set aside. And then by the time I got caught up, there just wasn't a ton of time for me to actually focus on the Newts Readathon books, which is unfortunate. I still got an acceptable in all three of my classes: Divination, Defense Against the Dark Arts, and Care of Magical Creatures, which is great, but oh well. I know that those readathons will happen again, so it's no big deal. But I did read 9 books in the month of August, or I at least finished 9 books in the month of August, and I feel really good about that because that's one of the better reading months that I've had, number-wise. Unfortunately, a lot of the books I read, though, were not great. They were just kind of okay. So let's just jump into it. So in my July wrap-up, I mentioned the one book I finished for BOOKTUBE-a-thon in the month of July, and I finished 2 others during the month of August, for a total of 3 books read during BOOKTUBE-a-thon. So the first book I completed in August was Mary Poppins by P.L. Travers. This is a classic children's story. I think everybody knows the story of Mary Poppins. I listened to the audiobook, and I thought that the audiobook was very well done. I liked the narrator a lot. Unfortunately, this wasn't my favorite book in the world. It was just kind of eh. I knew going into it that it wasn't going to be anything like the Mary Poppins movie that I love. I know that Walt Disney made a lot of changes when he made the movie, and the author wasn't necessarily happy about that. So I wasn't expecting it to be like that. However, I didn't expect it to be like it was either. I think the biggest problem I had with it was it felt like it was a lot of little stories instead of one big cohesive story. It almost felt like short stories and Mary Poppins was there with the children. And sometimes it wasn't even really focused on her or the children. It was someone else in the book. It was a side character. It wasn't exactly what I wanted from it, but I still kind of enjoyed it. There were definitely chapters I enjoyed from this book, for sure. I just didn't enjoy all of it. I think it was definitely worth reading. I don't think that I'll read the rest of the books in this series at this point in my life, but I think that one day, way in the future, when I have children, I think this would be a fun series to read with them. So maybe later, maybe future Sarah will read these. I ended up giving this 3.5 out of 5 stars. And like I said, I think it was worth reading. I'm glad I read it, but I won't be continuing on with the series anytime soon. The next book I completed, and actually the last book I completely finished during BOOKTUBE-a-thon, was Amy and Roger's Epic Detour by Morgan Matson. This is a YA contemporary about a girl named Amy who lives in California. Recently, Amy's father was killed in a car accident, and Amy is having a hard time being behind the wheel of a car, or even just being in a car in general, but definitely not driving. Amy's family is moving to Connecticut, and her mom's already there. She had to get there early for work, and so now that it's summer, it's Amy's job to get herself and her car moved to Connecticut as well. But since Amy's not comfortable driving, Amy's mom reaches out to a friend of hers from California, and her friend's son, Roger, is going to drive Amy across the country to Connecticut, basically. And Amy and Roger take a little bit of a detour from the plan that Amy's mom put in motion for them to follow on this road trip. This was such a cute story. I love Morgan Matson. I always forget how much I love Morgan Matson's books until I read another one, and I'm like, wow, she's such a good writer. But I really fell in love with the story. I think this might be my favorite Morgan Matson book I've read so far. I'm not really sure because it's been a while since I've read The Unexpected Everything, and that one was my favorite. But I thought Amy and Roger's relationship was so cute. I just really loved the story. I immediately, after finishing this book, wanted to jump in my car and just like take off on an adventure. Of course, I couldn't do that, but I wanted to, and it I just loved the way that Morgan incorporated so many little details. Like, you can tell there was just so much thought and love put into this book. She created all these different playlists for the different situations that they were in, that things that they would be listening to once they figured out what their next destination was going to be. And there were a lot of pictures that were scattered about as well that were from Amy's kind of road trip diary, but actually they were from where Morgan took the road trip herself and added those things in there, and I thought that was really cool. But yes, I'll be honest, I struggle sometimes with YA contemporary nowadays, but I absolutely love this story. I think I'll always love Morgan Matson stories, and I ended up giving this one 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was super cute. It was such, like, the perfect summer book, and this is the perfect, like, readathon book, because it was so fast. And yeah, I loved it. Go read it. So the next book I finished was actually the audiobook that I was listening to before BookTubeathon started, so I had to go back, finish it up. And that audiobook was Alex and Eliza by Melissa De La Cruz. This is the author's idea of the kind of teenage years of Alexander Hamilton and Elizabeth Schuyler and kind of their love story. So it was really cute. There's not a whole lot, like, factually known about the two of them, so I liked how the author just kind of made up her own idea of what happened, going by what is known and filling in her own ideas from there. And I think she did a fairly good job with it. I liked this book okay. I'm a huge fan of the musical Hamilton, which is why I wanted to read it. I don't know, it wasn't great, but it was good, I guess. It's hard to explain. I think that if I hadn't listened to the audiobook, it would have felt a little bit too much like a textbook at times. So I'm glad I listened to the audiobook because that kept me engaged in the story. But I mean, it was just okay. I think that if you're a fan of Hamilton or you're a fan of these people, you would enjoy it to an extent. It may be worth reading for you. But I could also see where you definitely wouldn't enjoy it because a lot of this is made up. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was cute to an extent, but it wasn't, like, great. I don't know if I'll read the second one, but I guess I'm glad I read it, finally. The next book I finished was, again, a book I was reading before BookTubeathon started, so I went back and finished it once BookTubeathon was over. And that book is Dress Codes for Small Towns by Courtney Stevens. So this is a YA contemporary about a group of friends that are living in a small town, and it kind of takes a look at sexual fluidity and figuring out your sexuality and kind of how that can relate to, you know, what does that mean when you are religious and are you from a religious family. That being said, this book, while it does relate to religion and that the main character's father is a pastor and he's over a youth group in their small town and the characters are religious, it doesn't harp on religion itself really at all. It didn't feel like it was pushed or anything. It was just looking at things from these characters' viewpoints, and I really appreciated that. Coming from a small town that is very religious, while I wasn't really super religious myself, and I'm still not, there was still a lot that I understood coming from kind of that background in this book, and I really appreciated that. I loved the way that sexual fluidity was discussed in this book. I really, really appreciated that. And I really just liked the dynamic between the group of friends. I feel like we don't see a lot of books anymore that are just focused on a big friend group. A lot of it is mostly focused on, like, 2 people and some kind of romance thing. And I just really liked the way this book was done. I will say it took me a little while to get into, which I wasn't expecting. So that kind of disappointed me a little bit, but overall, by the end, I really enjoyed this book and I highly recommend it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. And I'm really, really glad I finally got to this book because it's one I'd been wanting to read since it came out last year. The next book I completed is actually one that I started during BookTubeathon and then I put it down so I could finish Dress Codes for Small Towns, and then I came back to it. And that book is From Twinkle with Love by Sindai Menon. This is a YA contemporary about an Indian American girl named Twinkle who wants to be a filmmaker, and she has had a crush on this boy basically her entire life. And she gets the opportunity to enter a film into this, like, local film festival, and the twin brother of the guy that she has a crush on is going to produce it with her. I really wanted to love this book. I loved Sindai Menon's first book, When Dimple Met Rishi, but this one just wasn't for me, honestly. It just wasn't my cup of tea. I really didn't like any of the characters except Sahil. Most of the characters in this book were just very unlikable, and that really deterred my enjoyment, honestly. I hated the Secret Admirer plotline. I didn't think that was needed at all. But I did like how everything was wrapped up in the end. I think that Twinkle really grew a lot by the end of the novel. It just took so much of the novel for her to get there that I just wanted to slap her. And I really, really loved Twinkle's passion for filmmaking and seeing that side of her. This is told through Twinkle writing letters to her favorite female directors, and I thought that was kind of an interesting way to tell the story. But I like books that are kind of written in like a letter format, so I appreciated that part of it. And I definitely don't want to deter people from reading this book, because I'm really glad that this book is out in the world, and I'm glad that it's getting as much hype as it is. But it just wasn't for me, but that doesn't mean it won't be for you, and I still recommend people reading it. I still recommend you checking it out if you like contemporary, but this one just wasn't for me. It wasn't what I really wanted. I only gave it 3 stars, which isn't a terrible rating. It just wasn't, it's not something that I'll ever read again, but I'll definitely be reading more books by this author because I like her writing style a lot. The next book I finished was another audiobook that I have been reading off and on for a few months now, and that book is Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. You know, it's a classic book. Like I said, I listened to the audiobook for this one. I'm glad I listened to the audiobook. I found that when it comes to classics, especially older classics, audio is an easier way for me to get into the story. However, this one was just kinda eh. I've watched the movie before several years ago, and I thought the movie was great. But it was just okay. I'm glad I read it. I was kind of bored through a lot of it. I had a hard time keeping up with some of it. I just wasn't really motivated to read it. I have a hard time with books written from this time period, honestly. So I kind of expected that might happen going in, but I do want to rewatch the movie now. So there's that. And I thought that the audiobook narrator did a great job. So there's that. But I only gave this one 3 stars as well. And I'm glad I can finally put it on my red shelf, and that's really all I have to say about it. I really, really want to like Jane Austen's books more than I do, but I think I just have a hard time with books from that time period. The next book I read was the first book I actually got to complete for the Newts Readathon. And that book was Gone Rogue, which is the 2nd volume in the Wires and Nerve graphic novel duology by Marissa Meyer and illustrated by Stephen Gilpin. So this graphic novel duology basically takes place after the events in Marissa Meyer's Lunar Chronicles series, and it follows Aiko as a main character, and so I'm really glad that she got her own story. I really, really enjoyed this 2nd volume. I always enjoy being back in this world. I think I'm going to have to reread this series pretty soon too, because I love this world that she's created, and it was really cool both in this volume and the first volume to just see how all of these characters are depicted and what they look like and how they interact in art form. I thought this story was pretty good. I do think that there were like little bits and pieces of plot points that weren't really wrapped up as much as they should have been, so there was a lot of openness to it, which would make sense if there was going to be more books, but from my understanding this is supposed to be the last one. So it's kind of irritating to me that not everything was wrapped up like it should have been. But if she decided to write more of these, I would be more than willing to read them. I would love to read them. And I think these are really great graphic novels. And if you are a fan of the Lunar Chronicles and you haven't read the Wires and Nerve graphic novels yet, definitely check them out. I think they're definitely worth reading. The art style is really, really cool. And the stories are pretty good. So I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I completed in August was The Hotel Between by Sean Easley. I actually received an e-arc of this via NetGalley. So thanks to Simon & Schuster for sending that my way. And I have actually posted a non-spoiler review on my channel, so I'll link that down in the description. So I'm not going to go too in-depth on this, but this book was really good. It's a new middle grade book that's coming out on September 4th. This book is about twins Cameron and Cassia, who have never known their parents. They've grown up with their grandmother. They've been told that their mother has died, but that nobody really knows what happened to their father. Cass thinks that their father abandoned them, but Cam doesn't think so. He thinks that something more happened. And so through a turn of events, Cam ends up discovering this place called the Hotel Between, which is basically a magical hotel that has doors to all these different places around the world. You can kind of go wherever you want to go in the world, which is really, really cool. I mean, I loved the concept of the hotel itself. And Cam ends up finding out that this hotel is related to his father. So he kind of goes on a journey of trying to figure out what happened to his dad and learning more about this hotel and just going on an adventure. It was a really good story. I really enjoyed it. I think that fans of middle grade, especially middle grade fantasy, are going to really like this book. And I hope that if you are watching this and you are a fan of middle grade, that you check this out, because I haven't heard a ton of buzz about it yet, but I think it's really, really good. There's a lot of great diversity representation, and there's just a lot of good things going for it. Like I said, check out my review because I go super in depth in that, so I don't want to harp on too much in this video and basically just make another version of my review. But I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, and I can't wait to read the next one when it comes out sometime next year. And the very last book I finished in August was Unravel Me by Tahara Mafi. This is the second book in the Shatter Me series, which is a YA dystopian series about a girl named Juliet who kills people when she touches them. It's kind of the fatal flaw. She's not real happy about it. I read Shatter Me a few months ago, I want to say in June, and it was just kind of okay, but I liked this book a lot better. I think that the first kind of half or so, my feelings were very similar to how I felt about Shatter Me, but by the time I got to the second half, it picked up a lot and I enjoyed it a lot more, and I'm excited to read the third book now. I listened to this on audiobook as well. The narrator is okay. She's not my favorite audiobook narrator, but I think she captures the tone of the story well enough that I'll probably continue listening to the series on audio. But yeah, I enjoyed it more than the first book, so whereas before I started this book, I didn't know if I would want to read the entire series, and now I know I at least want to read the third one. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars as well. And at some point soon, hopefully, I will be starting Ignite Me. So this video turned out real long, so I'm gonna go ahead and end this now. But let me know down in the comments what you read in August and what your favorite book was that you read in August, and I'll see you guys next time with another video. Bye.